is the Hayden Lake watershed, or all of the land that drains to Hayden Lake, a seemingly timeless body of water that is often heralded as a gem in the Idaho Panhandle. This is the special place where so many narratives concerning Hayden Lake have been composed and honed. It is the place that best resonates with this longtime resident. The quality of this lake water is a testament to the hard work and care of many people over decades. We're concerned that the nutrient-carrying sediments and contamination that enter the lake from the watershed by way of Hayden Creek could jeopardize the water quality. So the work to keep the lake healthy and resilient continues with us today, because in the words of Jeff Harvey, once a lake has lost its quality status, it's nigh unto impossible to get it back. The health of any lake is directly dependent on the health of its watershed. Hayden Lake has a relatively healthy watershed, managed for private and national forest timber, for public access and recreation, and for the preservation and protection of this priceless natural resource. Hayden Creek is the primary tributary carrying water from the watershed into the lake. The watershed is traversed by a network of access roads which are required to accomplish the objectives of forest management. We're here today to give you a unique experience of one of the roads in the Hayden Lake watershed, Forest Service Road 437, also called the Lower Hayden Creek Road. This road runs from near the mouth of the creek, where it empties into the lake, about 1.5 miles up into the watershed to where it intersects with an important forest thoroughfare, the Ohio Match Road. Along this stretch, 437 crosses private land and enters Forest Service land. It cuts through steep northeast-facing slopes. It runs parallel to Hayden Creek and in some places crosses the creek's floodplain. The public uses FSR 437 for camping, biking and hiking, ATV travel access and mud bogging, and access to this shooting range and other shooting sites along the road. You may have passed this way on your forest adventures, and you may have noted the dry ruts and potholes as you bounced along. This is what it's like most of the time. But let's show you what happens when it rains. The footage you see here was captured on 2 different days. First, 2 days after a rain event.
See how wet and muddy the road is? Been a couple of days since it's rained.
Then,
should give you an idea of what it's like during an event up here. Because man, is this an event.
when it rains, those potholes can fill up with water in a matter of minutes. Excess water runs off the steep slopes. When it reaches the hard impermeable roadway, it picks up speed and sediment and finds its way over the edge of the road and into Hayden Creek. From Hayden Creek, this load of sediment will make its way to Hayden Lake, carrying nutrients from the slope and whatever other contaminants have been caught up in the runoff. When filming during the rainstorm, we could see that sediment-laden runoff drains directly from the road surface every 10 to 20 yards all along the lower Hayden Creek Road. In this location, Hayden Creek is just a few feet away through the brush line.
Hayden Creek is off to our right, running through the woods. And this is the floodplain right here, but here's a little piece of Hayden Creek that comes over and touches the road. The sediment from the road's right here.
Here we have a long stream of runoff that has collected more and more sediment as it flows down the road. Eventually, it reaches the other side, flows over the edge and down the fill slope.
Ooh. Get rid of that. Oh.
Right below, through the trees, you can see Hayden Creek running cloudy below the road discharge and clear above. Direct sedimentation like this occurs through the combined efforts of gravity and Mother Nature, with little extra human involvement. Elsewhere, some of the flow is caught in the deep depressions in the road, where the sediment concentrates into nice muddy stew. Traffic that moves along the rutted road splashes it over the edge. That loose sediment doesn't look like it travels far, but it will be picked up by this or future rains and carried down the slope and into the creek. Yes, runoff like this happens only during rainstorms and snow melts, but when it happens, it's big. Finally, there are live springs that come from groundwater. They drain across this road, pick up dirt and dust, and just like runoff from precipitation, carry it to Hayden Creek. The spring contribution might be small when it's dry, but it's a well-worn path that becomes substantial when it rains. Runoff, whether from rain, snowmelt, or natural springs, adds a lot of sediment to Hayden Creek because FSR runs adjacent to it. Why do we care about sediment in Hayden Creek? Sediment carries phosphorus, nitrogen, and possible contaminants. Hayden Creek flows into the north arm of Hayden Lake, where the sediments settle to the bottom and add to the nutrient-rich layer that supports aquatic weed growth. Then, things that move the water, like wind and passing boats, stir up sediment and increase water turbidity. Sediment drifts throughout the lake and fills in the gravelly lake bottom, degrading fish habitat. These are all effects that over time degrade the quality of the lake. The poor location of FSR 437 is not the only issue. Along its route are low spots in the terrain where water would normally collect and infiltrate. Here, recreators have created mud bogs by driving their heavy vehicles through the wet areas, purposefully cutting deep ruts and displacing the soil.
This area is heavily used for parking, but a lot of driving around, running right down onto Hayden Creek. A lot of mud bogging in here as well.
These areas no longer slow runoff water and give it time to sink in. They are instead a source of sediment from the exposed earth that hardens, erodes, and washes downhill.
A lot of mud bogging in here. A lot of damage to this area. It needs to be crossed over and then planted, grow up into young trees.
Outside of the location of the road itself, the most controversial feature in Lower Hayden Creek is the shooting range. Located in an abandoned gravel pit, it has become a popular and inexpensive destination for target shooters. Bullets and cartridges left embedded in the slope and littering the ground spread lead contamination at the firing line and in the hill slope. In the past, shooters have used appliances, for example televisions and air conditioners, as targets. Waste from these is hazardous to both human health and the environment. Contamination from this area is picked up by runoff and carried into the creek and downstream to Hayden Lake. Given the concentration of shooting at this site, the lead use could warrant a Resource Conservation and Recovery Act designation at best. At worst, the site could qualify for regulation as a Superfund site under the Comprehensive Emergency Response and Liability Act. To be fair, some shooting groups and individuals have stepped up to keep the site far cleaner than in past years. However, no one has formal responsibility for the site, so there is no assurance that such care will continue. The Hayden Lake Watershed Association has made constructive suggestions to the Forest Service to solve the problems along FSR 437. First, abandon and fully decommission the stretch of road between the Forest Service boundary and Ohio Match Road. This would remove the worst case of direct sedimentation of Hayden Creek. Create a small, limited parking area at the old intersection of the two roads. The 400-yard walk from the Ohio Match Road to the shooting range would likely discourage attempts to haul in appliances as targets. Block and revegetate widened areas, and take other steps to stop the practice of mudbogging. The part of FSR 437 that crosses private land could be closed at the discretion of the private landowners. Limiting its use would further limit sedimentation. The association has further suggested an alternate route on the drier southeast side of Hudlow Mountain. The gun range use has grown. Like ATV and ski trails, it deserves to be governed and managed in a sustainable manner. If the gun range is to be left open, the association suggests that it be under the management of a responsible organization and governed either by a special use permit or a cost-share agreement with the Forest Service. This is our beloved Hayden Lake, fed from the Hayden Lake watershed by Hayden Creek. The quality of this lake water has endured so much change over time. Responsibility for keeping it healthy lies with us today.